It's my pleasure to welcome the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions to the stage this afternoon. He's held office as MP since 1992 in various different roles, from MP to party leader, from opposition to government. I've had the pleasure of knowing the Secretary of State for a number of years since he spoke at an Institute of Marriage and Family conference in 2009, so he's no stranger to Ottawa. At that time, he spoke about his work with the do tank that he set up, the Centre for Social Justice. Through their research, they looked at the issues of education, welfare dependency, drug use, trade laws, trade skills, lawlessness, and many other social factors. Does that sound familiar to some of the issues that we're dealing with as well? The roots of many of these social justice issues are founded in well-meaning but wrong-headed possible solutions. In Canada, this dates back to the 1940s. Similarly, in Britain, the Beveridge Report was written in 1942, and our respective nations have been reaping the rewards, the outcomes, ever since that time. Subsequent to founding the Centre for Social Justice, Iain has been re-elected as a part of the Conservative government and appointed to his role as Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, roughly equivalent to Canada's Ministry of Employment and Social Development. His commission has been to undo the negative outcomes and put in place a plan that will repair the damage that has been done over the last 70 years. I look forward to hearing his update. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in welcoming Secretary of State, Mr. Iain Duncan Smith.
Hey, thanks. Good to have you. Dave, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that kind introduction. Can I say that seeing people in the hall just now, when I was outside, I was chatting to somebody and they said that you must always be pleased when you come to speak at a place like this where you get a number of people come to hear you speak. Must make you feel gratified. And when I heard that, I was thinking of what Winston Churchill said when offered much the same kind of persuasive platitude. And he said, if instead of coming to hear me speak, they'd come to see me hang, there would be 10 times as many people in the room. I stand by that. It's my thanks, Dave, to you and to the Manning Centre for the organisation here and for inviting me to come. I thought I'd run through a few thoughts about what we've done and a thought going ahead for the future about where I think conservatism really lies and what actually it contains. In 2004, looking back to the point that Dave made earlier on, I set up an organisation called the Centre for Social Justice. At that time, the Conservatives were going through an understatement, a difficult time. Tony Blair was leader of the Labour Party and was riding high, having won 2 elections, sweeping all before him. Conservatism at that stage then was kind of in despair, really, and the angry debate about whose fault it was raged within its ranks to such an extent that it was difficult to get the party to focus on even thinking about regaining government. Argument raged between the self-styled mods and what they called the rockers. It means nothing to you lot here, I suspect, but it did mean a lot to us then, or now more the modernizers and the traditionalists. Hardly a day went by, but the new theory was announced by one or other of these conservatives saying there was instant success to be had if only we did this, that, or the other thing, maybe changing even the colour of our ties, I don't know. Some said we should accept that too few wanted conservatives anymore and that the whole theory of conservatism was gone. We should kind of immolate, burn the party and reform a new modern party from the ashes of the last. On the other side, the solution was to return to the halcyon days of Mrs. Thatcher and sharpen and increase our critique of that arch charlatan, they said, Mr. Blair. Yet conservatism on both sides, I think, of the Atlantic has survived over many, many years because it's based not on ideology, but on an unchanging set of values. This has always allowed conservatives to accept change where necessary, shaped, however, by those unchanging values, which underpin then policies. Strong families creating strong communities, grounded by personal freedom, whose boundaries are governed by democratic consent and always arbitrated by the rule of law. It's through these perennial values that we weigh and assess as conservatives the need to preserve that which is good with that which must therefore change. And as one of the founding fathers of modern conservatism, Edmund Burke, wrote, "We must all obey," he said, "the great law of change. It is the most powerful law of nature." And the question, therefore, is not just what or whether, but I think when and how. In Britain, for too long, Conservatives had allowed themselves, I think, to be defined by a narrow number of policy areas, 3 in particular that were strong: taxation, immigration, law and order, 3 that almost resonated every time. And more than that, Conservative speeches too often were inclined in a sense to lecture people whilst looking back at past triumphs which gave previous leaders a kind of unassailable and mythical status. Margaret Thatcher's reforms of the trade unions, the liberalising of the economy and tax reduction became for many the definition of what it meant to be a Conservative. So instead of applying our values to new challenges, we were to be defined only by the challenges of the past. I think that may sound familiar to Conservatives the world over. And on the other side, some complete change. They wanted total change, but they were also wrong, because you don't meet the challenge of being too narrow by trying to become something that you are not. It never works, it never stays with you. No, my belief has always been that you meet the challenge by showing that your values cover a wider and broader agenda, applying enduring conservative principles to those contemporary challenges. And all this brings me back to the Centre for Social Justice and why I set it up. I did so because I believed for some time that we could not achieve a modern and flexible economy holding its own in the global marketplace unless all in our society who were able to played a productive part. Yet under the last and left-wing Labour government, I believe, a quarter of the working-age population was left economically inactive and millions languished on out-of-work benefits. Such dependency on the state, I believe, not only go loading onto taxpayers massive cost, huge sums of money, but worse, and I think this is the real bit that we as Conservatives often find difficult to talk about, but worse in a sense, leaves those people and their families trapped too often by the very system that should have been helping them to get back on their feet. In visit after visit to some of our more deprived areas of Britain, I came to see how they had become places without hope or opportunity. In neighborhoods blighted by worklessness, where gangs were prevalent, debt and drugs were the norm, families broken down, those living there had one thing in common. They were, for the most part, dependent wholly on the state for their daily needs. With income inequality the worst for a generation, whilst the middle-class majority were aware of the general problems in poor communities, they remained largely unaware of the true nature of life sometimes on some of our social housing estates. For too long, we let these problems be ghettoized as though they were in a different country, even thinking you could police your way out of them. But at the root of this problem was that Conservatives, I believe, had abandoned the subject of poverty to the poverty lobby and the liberal left. Perhaps our main contribution to the subject, in passing, as we would do, was that whenever Conservative politicians did speak about poverty, they did so with fingers wagging and some harsh punitive language. My party, the party of Wilberforce and Shaftesbury, seemed to have forgotten that we had always had a historic mission to help people improve the quality of their lives, not just taking the easy option of sustaining people in dependency whilst looking the other way. Oh no. At the Centre of Social Justice, we were to reveal the true state of the nation in terms of social deprivation, uncovering a Britain blighted by multiple and overlapping social problems, often perpetrated over generations. But our purpose was also to do something else. It was to show that the Conservatives cared about people trapped in dependency. That far from wanting simply to punish people, our vision was to transform people's lives, putting hope back where it had gone, and aligning aspiration with hard work, spurred on by the strong moral values of fairness, opportunity, and compassion. By contrast, the left would have it that a sympathetic approach is to sustain the most disadvantaged on slightly better incomes. But the reality is that there is nothing laudable about handing out money if in doing so it labels individuals incapable or stops them from moving into work. If it means parents are better off living apart than together, if it places families in housing that they could never afford if they took a job, there is no kindness in a system that traps people, leaving them in a twilight world where life is dependent on what is given to you rather than what you are able to create. Where for the most people, their life's direction of travel is dictated by the informed decisions they can make to afford a large family. Should they move in order to take up a better paid job? Can they risk a mortgage to get a bigger home? Yet for too many of those locked on Britain's welfare system, that process of making responsible and positive choices about them and their families had become skewed. Those who cleverly played the system were most likely to be rewarded, whilst those who tried to do the right thing found endless stumbling blocks in their way. Meanwhile, those who did nothing at all, sitting on welfare, unwilling or unable to move into work, had money paid out to pacify them regardless, with no incentive to aspire to a better life. As Conservatives, I believe our mission must be to challenge the accepted wisdom of the left, that poverty is only about money and that more state money alone can cure it. For whilst a welfare check might protect against hardship, it can never substitute for a loving parent, an inspirational teacher, or a hard-earned paycheck. Whether it is debt, family breakdown, addiction, educational failure, or worklessness, surely our aim must be to tackle the pathways that lead people into disadvantage in the first place, supporting people to regain control over their own lives, springing themselves from that terrible poverty trap. And in government, since 2010, therefore, our single-minded aim then had to be to act on this vision for change. And I think it is a proud legacy that a Conservative-led government was the first in the UK to make social justice a lasting ambition as Conservatives. Not a political whim or a quick win, but rather putting in place the structures necessary to deliver real change now and for years to come. And it is to this end that we have undertaken, I believe, the most significant and radical set of reforms in modern times, reforming Britain's welfare system, education system, justice system, and more. So that these systems work together cohesively, turning around people's lives now and transforming the chances for future generations. So first and foremost, this life change starts with the family. Promoting strong family relationships, forming at the heart of which lies marriage, forming the bedrock of strong communities. This isn't about government interfering in family life. Rather, it's about recognizing that stable families matter for our society in the fight against poverty and in setting children on the path to success. It's about parents taking responsibility for their children. And it's about government realizing that we have to create a level playing field for the decisions that people make about their families. And in doing so, and this is why I am a Conservative, because I believe once you set the level playing field, in doing so, we must remember we should trust people, optimistic about the choices that they will make for their common good. And that is why, on coming into office, we set about redressing imbalances that had skewed people's choices for too long, through a system tilted against poor families who were wanting to stay together, and at its heart, tilted, of course, against that ultimate commitment of marriage. Now in the UK, we are reducing what we call the couple penalty. That's the penalty in the welfare system against people staying together, as well as reversing the bias in the tax system by introducing a marriage tax break that will benefit up to 4 million people as enacted. And in Canada here, I see Conservatives cutting taxes for families through income splitting, no longer penalizing households. no longer penalizing households. One parent works, but supporting hard-working families to make the choice that is right for them. I stress this point about being optimistic about people when they're given the opportunity will invariably make the balanced and right choices for themselves. So as a result of all of those changes, we are at last beginning to see improving family stability in the UK, with the number of children living with both parents rising over the last 2 years. This is a significant change of direction. And across both sides of the Atlantic, we know that we can only afford those policies now because the difficult decisions we took during tough times, making sure we cut our country's deficit so we can cut our taxes too, that discipline and determination now pays off. So with the family first, then comes education. Here our reforms are about ensuring that schools within a framework of clear discipline offer structure, routine, and a fairer chance of success, no matter what the child's background. Through what we call the pupil premium, worth almost 2,500 Canadian dollars per child this year in the UK, we are providing additional help to disadvantaged children, ensuring a positive platform for all our children to fulfill their potential. This investment in early years stands to pay dividends further down the line, equipping individuals with the knowledge, aspiration, and social capital that they need to prosper. Thus, we are ensuring that once again, education in the UK is seen by struggling families as the fundamental pathway to a better life for their children. Where people's lives do go off course, nonetheless, the welfare system, of course, must be there to offer them a second chance. A system that allows everyone to take their life into their own hands, given an opportunity to achieve and to take pride in their achievement. No one, whatever the difficulties they face, should be left behind in the ambition to shape and control their own futures. Of course, in the most severe cases of sickness and disability, welfare must support individuals. But even then, it must be about more than sustainment alone. That is why we are transforming at home the disability benefits, not just aimed at saving money, but saving lives, rightly helping disabled people to meet the extra costs they face, but making sure they won't lose that money if they take up a job and try and help their own circumstances at the same time. So we leave open the door to work. Where people can, we know that work is the best way for individuals to secure their futures. For work is what develops us, lifts us, and offers us self-worth and security. The money we earn is always more powerful than the money we are given. And that is why, through our welfare reforms, it has always been so vital to bring an end to the something-for-nothing culture that too often meant moving into work left people worse off than they were before. And this is what we are achieving now through the big benefit change that I am making called universal credit, perhaps the greatest change to our welfare system for a generation, rolling out new benefit system gradually across the country which simplifies back-to-work benefits and makes real work pay. In doing so, now everyone is required to sign up to what I call a claimant commitment on arrival in the office when they're unemployed. This is as a condition of receiving benefits, and this claimant commitment makes clear the claimant's responsibilities on the one hand to the taxpayer in return for their support. And the idea of sanctions flows through that if they do not do what they're meant to do. Such is the system that we have created in universal credit, that if you do the right thing under universal credit, working as much as you are expected to do, then you will move out of poverty. This, I believe, is the clearest commitment we can make to helping people get on in life through a new welfare contract with the people of Britain. On government's part, we invest in targeting our support at those who need it most and in restoring work incentives for the rest. For taxpayers, we restore fairness not least through capping benefits at average earnings, so that families on benefits face the same choices about where they live and what they can afford as everybody else. But so too for those once trapped in the system, which meant it was more worthwhile sitting on benefits than going to work. For even as we have capped how much people can receive on out-of-work benefits in the UK, we have exempted those receiving in-work credits, once again leaving the door open to work, and we have seen thousands take that decision to move into work as a result. For those receiving state support, this is our commitment. Where once welfare was a way of life, now you can be sure that work will pay, meaning the right choice is also the logical one. The opportunity now is yours to make that choice, a fair contract which lifts people out of poverty. But this change doesn't and will not be achieved overnight. Surely not, for those are not simple fixes for short-term gain. Yet in the UK, even already we are seeing signs of a meaningful cultural change, restoring our society, one life at a time. For the young person, once with bleak prospects, but now one of a growing proportion in employment or education, who has their foot on that first rung of the ladder, able to move onwards and upwards. For the long-term unemployed, for whom worklessness had become entrenched, too often written off in the past as hopeless, but now receiving meaningful help to overcome the problems that hold them back through what we call the work program, the largest payment by results program ever of its kind, helping people back to work on an unparalleled scale and de-risking taxpayers, for we only pay when the providers get them into work and sustain them in work for a period of time. And for the older worker, previously forced out of their job and onto the scrap heap when they reach the pensionable age, but now able to choose when they retire, continuing to bring their wisdom to the workplace, if they wish, filling the demands for jobs and keeping the economy growing. When it does come to our pension system, we've introduced radical reforms here as well, improving worker participation through automatically enrolling people into workplace pensions, lifting the default retirement age, and creating new, simpler state pension that reduces the means test and makes all savings pay regardless how much you manage. This, I believe, is the welfare legacy on which we as Conservatives in my country will stand. The simple maxim that it pays to work and it pays to save. In other words, reform is not just about the benefit system, but about social renewal. Part of that Conservative vision I described right at the start: strong families and strong communities, upholding both personal freedom and personal responsibility. Yet there is one last and equally radical reform that is necessary to complete this process, and that is to shift the way that governments, both local and national, fund social improvement projects, opening this to investors well beyond the state. So, Conference, I just want to put this to you now because we are working on this heavily in the United Kingdom. By putting a monetary value on a given positive social outcome, a return on investment, and underwriting that return, government can allow these investors to buy into what I call social impact bonds. If the program delivers the outcomes, investors see a return, whilst government pays not for the process of tackling the problem, but for the success at the end of that process. So already in the UK, we've become a kind of world leader in this, putting this principle into practice with over 24 social impact bonds now up and running, 10 of them financed by my department's innovation fund, which I set up 4 years ago. And this has proved the concept with cutting-edge programs, seeing a return on investment through positive educational and employment outcomes for some of our hardest to reach young people, set already without these programs on a path to failure. So too, in establishing social impact bonds, more widely where the UK government has done a lot to put infrastructure into place. In the UK, we've created the big society capital, collecting up the money from dormant bank accounts and introduced a social investment tax relief, which would generate up to nearly £500 million, or just short of 1 billion Canadian dollars over the next 5 years. Without doubt, I believe there is still much more to do if we are to realize the full benefits of this nascent market. Yet I believe the potential is enormous, with social investment standing to make the single, I believe, most significant difference as to how governments fund and deliver social services in years to come. Not just through a more efficient use of taxpayer pounds or dollars, but in growing the money available for social programs beyond government philanthropy and/or government alone. Harnessing investment from businesses, trust funds, entrepreneurs and more, groups who might never before have seen themselves as part of any social action. With it, that money brings the rigor and discipline of the private sector and the innovation of the most savvy entrepreneurs, as well as what I call the fidelity guarantee, an assurance, to use a British phrase, that what you pay for through the bond does exactly what it says on the tin. This value of this guarantee cannot be underestimated, for it stops what has so often been the downfall of social programs, the scourge of possible success in the past, that in implementing a program that is proven to work, it ends up being modified, tinkered with, to the extent that at different levels in the service that delivers it, the program you started with is not the program that you finish with. With social impact bonds, on the other hand, if the project ends up being changed, no result means no payout, saving money by ensuring that successful programs are delivered properly and as they are meant to. But what's more, social investment shores up government finances because the whole premise is of a return linked to a meaningful outcome, be it getting someone into work, into rehab, off the streets, or more. And over time, it's my hope that this will in turn turn the tide of the whole culture of government spending, no longer pouring money in and too often hoping for the best, but commissioning outcomes and only paying for what works. Every pound, I say, or every dollar for life change. That must be the opportunity of a lifetime. And if we can get this right, if we can get this last point right, I believe the effect that social investment could have on society here or in the UK would be dramatic. For too long, a disparity between the top and the bottom of our society has prevailed. We have a group of wealth creators at the top who have little or no connection to those who live life at the bottom. Yet in so many cases, what divides the two is little more than a different start in life. I believe that social investment gives us an opportunity to lock not just wealth back into our most disadvantaged societies, but something else as well. Just imagine a social enterprise working in a particular deprived neighborhood, be it in London, Toronto, Glasgow, or Montreal. Investors buy into it, as with any other investment they might, but they will want to see it flourish because they are risking their money that could otherwise be reaping a return somewhere else. These investors will want to see that social program succeed, taking an interest in that community where they would otherwise be totally detached, brought back into contact with our most disadvantaged individuals and families for mutual benefit. For too often what is lacking in these areas is not just money, but hope and aspiration, the belief that the cycle of poverty can be broken, role modeling, seeing people who have made a start and been successful. Thus, these wealth creators could have a powerful influence on the communities that they are investing in themselves, a human interface between two polarized worlds. Imagine it, bringing success to the doorstep of failure, the two ends of our society closer together, reuniting, as I say in the UK, reuniting the city and the inner city. Or I suppose here in Canada, I hope, reuniting Bay Street with Main Street. What a prospect. This rather rapid explanation of our reforms, therefore, including the last point that I made, I hope helps explain why I think Conservatives can and should regain the moral high ground on social change. The simple truth is that we cannot be prepared to see a growing number of our fellow citizens fall into an underclass of hopelessness and despair. For without them, we will be unable to create a modern, competitive economy. Compassion, some say, is soft. I have heard it argued as well that it is the preserve of the left. I disagree. There is nothing compassionate about increasing dependency by spending more of taxpayers' money to sustain someone in a lifetime on benefits. No. Conservative compassion is about getting someone back to work, taking the tough choices to move someone clear of that benefit system. It is about checking if someone on sickness benefits is fit for work, even though it seems harsh to some, or sanctioning someone who fails to do their utmost to try and find that work. This compassion has at its heart the certain knowledge that if a family has work, then their lives will be improved. And in that, government, I think, has a vital role to play. But it cannot be simply to dispense public money, stopping people from controlling their own lives. Oh no. Too often in the past, the left interfered where it was unwanted and was absent where it was needed. It subsidized people who made the wrong choice and penalized those who tried to do the right thing. No, government's role must be aligned to the task of helping people to succeed in a modern world. A government bringing cohesion to society, one that is on people's sides but not on their backs. Above all, no one wants to know that they out there gained at the expense of those worse off than them. That is why I believe it is a historic mission of Conservatives to help improve the lot of the working poor, to give them the right to hope and the chance to aspire. That is the human dimension of all, surely, that we do, that brought us here in the first place and must sustain us through good and bad times. It is that which will allow the voting public, when they look at us, to say, you know, they're okay. You know, they deliver. And when they do the right thing for the right reasons, bringing security and hope for me and my family. But conference, most of all, from my own perspective, I simply want people, when they look at us, to say, you know what? Conservatives are good for me and good for my neighbor. Thank you.